Hey folks, welcome to another episode of the Overcome Yourself podcast. In this episode, I'm gonna do something a little different than what I have done on the channel so far. I'm gonna discuss with you guys a topic that I have learned from this book right here called The Courage to be Disliked that has immensely helped me to draw boundaries in my personal relationship. The book is written by two Japanese counselors slash translators. If I remember correctly, their names are Ichiro Kishimiya and Fumitake Koga. So the plot goes something along the lines of this. A young student who is deeply frustrated about life and is very apprehensive about his future pays a visit to a philosopher because word has spread that this philosopher has made this audacious claim that happiness is something that is within everyone's reach and is attainable despite whatever limitations you think you have. So the book is essentially a conversation between the philosopher and the student, and what I particularly liked about the conversation is it's not a hierarchical conversation where the philosopher is passing down his wisdom as this old sage to his disciple, but rather a conversation that is participated by both parties in very equal footing. Whenever the philosopher introduces a revolutionary idea that the student doesn't agree with, he expresses his disagreement very strongly. What is very cool is in the dialogue you can see that the philosopher maintains his calm and composure and goes on to take apart the student's arguments or ideas. And the dialogue in itself is so good that I think it does a profound job at making us think about some fundamental ideas as to how to go about living our lives. So that is my little spiel about the book. I think it's phenomenal. You should definitely read it. I'm gonna link it in the description below. On to the topic at hand, which is a concept that the book introduces at some point. I don't remember if it was the third or the fourth chapter, which definitely had a huge impact on my perspective on drawing boundaries. Oh, one more thing before we move on. So the tenets in the book are based on the philosophical and psychological notions from Adlerian psychology. Alfred Adler was one of the three giants from the Viennese school of psychoanalysis. This is important because Adler's ideas were radical compared to Freud or Jung's, so I guess it wouldn't make sense to name drop Adler without introducing who he is first. Imagine the following scenario. Someone really close to you, maybe a family member, maybe a spouse or a partner, or maybe a very good friend, has been wanting to make a big life decision for a while. Maybe they want to leave a toxic relationship. Maybe they want to make a huge career change. Maybe they want to start their own business. Anyways, this is something that they have been thinking about for quite some time, and the topic keeps coming up in your conversations. You, being the empathetic and helpful individual that you are, you feel an inclination to push them in that direction. So perhaps there are moments when you guys hang out, you feel this sense that they don't really want to talk about it, but you feel compelled to talk to them about that stuff, ask how's it going, and then let them know of your thoughts as to why they should take a bold step forward with making that change. If that is who you are, Alfred Adler would tell you 9. And the reason for that is this concept that the book introduces to us, which is called the separation of tasks. So according to Adlerian psychology, the responsibility of a task solely resides on the individual who will suffer the consequences of doing the task or not doing the task. So going back to our previous example, the person that we are rooting for to make this big change, as much as we want to help them, it is their responsibility to make that change. And we shouldn't be insisting or pushing them in one direction versus the other. Now at first, this might sound very detached, but it's not, because what Adler recommends instead is that we make ourselves available for support and encouragement if asked for. So instead of pushing our friend or our partner to make this certain decision and take action upon it, we let them know that we think this is what's best for them, and then we're just there for them should they need help. I think this is profound, and it has the potential to change the dynamic of so many of our relationships. Here's why. If we're honest with ourselves, oftentimes when we are pushing our loved ones in one direction versus the other, while we do care for them, we also have vested interest in that. For example, if I'm feeling the inclination to give advice to my friend as to why he should be taking action to change his career and start a new business, it might have to do with me feeling important or me feeling valued in the friendship, and thus boosting my self-esteem. Another example of this would be parents trying to force their kids to study really hard. Is it good for the child? 100%. But in societies where saving face is a central value, it often comes from a place of looking good and increasing the parent's social status. In separation of tasks, we let go of all of that and are just there if our loved ones need help and support. So the relationship becomes more authentic, and the person doesn't feel pressured. They make their changes in their own timeline, and then they know that they are supported and encouraged in their endeavors. And there's a sense of safety in that. And as for us, the ones who are trying to help, we can let go and relax a little bit. We can trust them to make the decisions on their own timeline. And in that process, we allow them to make their own choices, which actually is a very big component of adulting, or as Carl Jung would call it, the process of individuation. Because by making those decisions or not, they learn to deal with the consequence of their choices, which makes them grow as people. Now that we hopefully have some understanding of separation of tasks, let's talk a little bit about how to actually go about implementing this idea in our relationships. The logical part of this is easy, like putting the dynamic or the interpersonal situation in the framework and figuring out which task belongs to whom is not complicated, but the emotional component of it is a whole different story. When the philosopher communicates this idea to the student brings up an example from his own life. So the student wants to become a librarian, whereas his family wants him to take over the family business. And now the student is feeling pressured to take over the family business even though he has no interest in it whatsoever. And the reason for that is because he doesn't want to upset his parents. And I think this is something that all of us can relate to on some level. Oftentimes, drawing boundaries is incredibly hard, not because we don't know what we want, but because we try to manage other people's emotions, which in this case would be the student trying not to offend or upset his parents. According to Adler, this is something that we should just stop doing, trying to manage other people's emotions and expectations. But easier said than done, right? While a whole book can be written about how to let go of the impetus to manage other people's emotions and how to stop reacting to that and staying grounded through all of that, I personally think just the awareness of the fact that we are making choices in our lives not because that's what we are aligned with, but because we are trying to satisfy the expectations of other people. And all sorts of different emotions could come up. It could be guilt, shame, having to put up with societal expectations. It's a complicated boat, but like I said, I think that awareness alone is very, very helpful in putting in the work that is required to break out of that. So that was my take on separation of tasks from Alfred Adler, which has been introduced beautifully and illustrated through many examples through this dialogue between the student and the philosopher in the book. I hope you found that helpful, and if you have thoughts or if you have had examples or struggles in your life with drawing boundaries, feel free to let me know in the comment section. And if you did find this helpful, you know what to do, right? See you in the next video.